Tank versus Frank. That's right. Gervonta Davis returns to the ring against Frank the Ghost Martin in a fight that is This is what we asked for when it came to Gervonta Davis. Get some names on your record. Start up in your level of competition going going towards title opportunities. Again, I have been very adamant on Gervonta Davis as being somebody who is indeed doesn't have a great resume. Doesn't have a great for all the talent that is in a top 10 pound for pound talent with a resume that doesn't have it to boot. Hence why he's not in my pound for pound top 10. He hasn't done the necessary work since beating Ryan Grcia. Now, this is a great start to get back on track with it. Fighting Frank the Ghost Martin is, and I repeat, is not a fluke, nor is it a pushover. We have covered Frank Martin on this show before. Frank Martin is a threat. Frank Martin is somebody who is actively a danger to the division. He is young, he is fast, he is strong, he's got some real power, he is slick. This is a competent fighter who has legitimate aspirations for a championship and can get one. And when it comes to Frank versus Tank, how is this fight going to go? Well, let's break it down, shall we? As we discuss how this fight can go, when it comes to Frank Martin, understand they have sparred before, they have fought before. This has been a fighter who has gotten in the ring with Tank in the past, and per everybody who was there in the gym, he gave him some good work. Not sure who won or who lost, but I can tell you this. It is widely understood that Frank and Tank got in the ring and sparring, and they were competitive with each other. It wasn't just a whitewashing event. No, it was real. It was a dogfight. Per reports and per word of mouth and per Tank and Frank on what they said. But again, that means nothing. Absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of boxing. What you do in the ring is what matters the most, not in sparring, in my estimation. What matters is we're looking at Frank Martin versus Tank. Frank is incredibly strong. Frank is a lean machine. That brother has some real, you can see it in his body. He is strong out the wazoo. He's got strength on strength, legitimate. He's got pop. He can legitimately crack. That strength and that power can give Tank some real trouble. It can hurt Tank. His power and his pop, it can give Tank some problems if Tank gets caught. If Tank gets hurt. And we've seen it before, because what do we see from Tank as he fights? The consistent thing is that he takes his time. We see him, like with Floyd Mayweather, download information, go through and dissect you, go through, not even throw a whole bunch, but go through and see what you're all about. Then when he gets you, that's when he starts opening up. And again, he is a lethal counterpuncher. He's a powerful counterpunching boxer. That's what he is. He's great. He's great. He's phenomenal. But it takes time to get fully what you are about and how to actively take you out. That's what Tank does, and we know this. Since that's the case, he is susceptible to getting caught early on in fights. It is. In that downloading process, he can get caught. He can get tagged. We saw it against Ryan Grcia, even though he knocked him out and dominated. Still, first couple rounds, we saw that right-handed Ryan Grcia get through to Tank. And ironically enough, Frank is a southpaw, just like Tank. So that southpaw advantage that normally Tank has on all of his opponents now is negated. Now he's going up against another southpaw. And also, Frank is slick. This is one of the few times I can remember when we've seen Tank take on somebody who is a slick defensive fighter. Not a stand and bang type guy like Leo Santa Cruz. Again, though, who's incredibly skilled still. But in terms of a guy who comes to you, that's who Tank fights the majority of the time. Now, a guy who makes you come to him, that's something I haven't seen Tank do a whole lot of. I haven't seen him. That's been a type of opponent that I have not seen Tank go up against often in his career. Since that's the case, those types of fighters, those more so methodical type fighters, don't give you a whole lot to work with, do they? No. They don't give you a whole many openings. Now you got to go and find those openings. And in finding those openings, you're potentially susceptible to getting caught yourself. That's what can happen in this fight. On top of it, Frank is incredibly defensive and explosive. Understand, it's not just the fact that he's good defensively. It's the fact that he can also, when he chooses to attack, that brother can jump out and get to you. Close the distance incredibly quickly. Make it so that you are almost caught off guard. by his explosion and speed in attacking and closing the gap with his jab and just the speed of hole that he has with his punches. And against somebody like Tank, who takes a while to really get going in terms of downloading, figuring you out, and then going in for the kill, those early rounds can be a real situation that we could see Tank get in trouble with Frank. We could see Frank Martin have the most of his success and have the best opportunity to get Tank out of there. Because now you're looking at somebody who, again, explosion for explosion. In terms of closing distance and reacting, Frank is somewhat on the level of Tank. I'm not saying that Tank isn't better. No, he is. But I'm saying this is in terms of the gap in athleticism. It's there. Oh, it's definitely there with Frank Martin. He could give him some real trouble. He could give him some real challenge. He could catch him off guard and actually catch him off balance and put him out, or at least knock him down. I'm not going to question Tank's toughness. No doubt he's got toughness. Absolutely. So does Frank Martin. Frank versus against Artem Harutyunyan. We saw him, and we covered this fight as well on this very channel. We saw Frank give Harutyunyan some looks. Harutyunyan adapted. And then from that adaptation, we saw Frank be able to adapt and change and turn the fight into his favor when it needed most. So he's got the ability to give Tank some real adversity with his athleticism, with his physicality, again, he's got a good jab. He's got great speed, especially with his hooks. He can close the distance and close the gap, and he can give you some real trouble in terms of he can jump on you when you least expect it and before you can react. This is a brother who's got some real talent. He can give Tank some real trouble. Not to mention the fact that Frank's footwork is elite. It is good. It is fast, and it can be something that can give Tank a lot of trouble, not just offensively, but defensively as well. His ability to get out of the way, utilize the ring, the fullness of the ring, to be able to have everything as a means of escape, it can be useful, especially with him having a longer reach and being taller than Tank. Frank can have some real opportunities to lull Tank in for counters, using that speed of his footwork and foot movement to get out the way and be able to essentially pull counter or counter with the hooks like he loves to throw in his attack. This could be a situation where we see Tank get lulled and potentially overextend, ironically enough. Make the mistake, even though he makes fairly few. And if he does, we could see Frank Martin have the ability to capitalize, because he's got the hand speed and the foot speed, not just to get out the way, but to also catch you in your mistakes. Or if he opts to trade, which again is incredibly dangerous, I understand. But still, it is an option. We could see Frank choose to trade with Tank in few situations. And if he does come out successful a couple of those times, that could lead to not only a bolstered sense of confidence, but potentially giving Tank more to think about as a barometer of, oh shoot, wait a minute, maybe I need to rethink my offensive attack. And if it can cause Tank to hesitate slightly, his ability to do what he wants to do when he wants to go in for the kill, that can spell some very long-term success for you as this fight goes forward. There is a possibility he can win. He indeed can. But it's got to be in the first 5. If it goes beyond 6, he can't. I don't think it's going to be able to happen. But if it can get him in the first 5, knock him out and use that strength and show that his power is real, then yes, it's possible that we could see Frank beat Gervonta Davis. It's entirely possible. Especially with the work that he likes to do on the inside when he is squared up with somebody. Again, it's a dangerous position, don't get me wrong. Especially against somebody like a Tank Davis. But still, Frank Martin, he is a brother who, he's the ghost because he can disappear on you. And he's also a ghost because when he gets on the inside, he is terrifying in terms of he will go and attack the body. He will stand his ground. And he will throw shots that will leave a mark. Yes, he will. Oh, yes, he will. That's not a question. That's what he can bring to the table. That's what he can do against somebody like a Tank Davis. It is entirely possible that we see Frank do an upset in this fight. However, that's not what I think is going to happen. We will see Tank beat Frank Martin. I think we're going to see Gervonta Davis do it. Actually, I know we're going to see Gervonta Tank Davis do it. Because here's the thing about Gervonta Davis. In everything I've said about Frank Martin, with respect, it is all true. Tank has everything else at a higher level. Everything at or above Frank Martin's level. Defensively, Tank is at the level of Frank Martin. Offensively, Tank is one of the best offensive fighters in the entirety of the sport. Counterpunching, we know Frank, he can be a good counterpuncher. Tank is a counterpuncher, one of the best counterpunchers in the world. He is people normally just see him as a knockout artist. He is a boxing savant, and his countering ability is what makes him so deadly, because he will always pick his shots and be patient. And when he does throw, it'll most likely be at the most opportune time when you aren't able to take it, and will always catch you. He's one of the best counterpunchers in the world. On top of the fact that he is sharper, he's faced a lot more opposition and opponents. He has the ability to be able to fight in more styles and in more frameworks than Frank Martin is able to do in his own right with respect to Frank Martin. We're looking at a fighter who is just on another level than Frank, and he will be able to win because with everything at his disposal, on top of with the athleticism argument that we made with Frank Martin, Tank is still as athletic as him. Oh, he can. He's one of the most explosive fighters in the world, and his ability to close the gap is something that is incredible. Like we saw again when he faced off against a bigger, seemingly stronger opponent in Mario Barrios when he had an insane reach advantage in that fight. Still, we saw Tank be able to close the distance and close the gap, not only with his explosiveness, but also with his ability to fight smart and to utilize his IQ and have the ability to outthink your opponent. That's what Tank does best. That's going to be the biggest thing in this fight. The experience that Tank has up to this point in his career is something that Frank still isn't at this stage in his career, which is insane. Both of them are 29 years old. Understandable. Both of them are still relatively young. But like I said earlier, we have Frank Martin, who is 29 years old with 19 fights. Tank, at 29 years old, has 29 fights in his career. He has faced more opposition. He has faced more styles. He has faced more trepidation, more a cavalcade of different looks, different fighters, different styles, different levels of power, different levels of speed, different tactics, all of it. And though Frank Martin, I believe, started boxing late, he is still at this stage in his career. Should have been further along. He should have. He should have. Even I believe there was an opportunity where Frank could have fought Shakur Stevenson, and he declined that option. But this might have been in the height of Shakur in the whole retirement saga that he was in. But even still, if that is true, and please verify for yourself to make sure, because I always fact check whatever we say on this show. But I believe that's what happened. In a sense, that is what happened. Even in a loss against Shakur, that would have put him leagues above in terms of being better prepared to fight somebody like Tank. Because at least you would have gotten an understanding of how to be a better technical boxer. Learn from every fight. And every opponent is a form of master that you can take from. Not necessarily saying that they're better than you, but they can utilize something or do something that can give you an opportunity to be a scholar of, to take from them and apply it to your own game. Shakur, him being a defensive specialist, him being a distance managing god, and having the ability to be able to always have control of where he wants his opponents to be and how close he lets them get to him. That could have been something that could have helped you out before you face off against Tank. Now, you're jumping in the deep end against a fighter who has all this vast knowledge of experience, and while you, with respect to how good you are, still are rudimentary compared to what he's able to bring to the table. And I don't say rudimentary in a bad way in this sense. I'm saying comparative to the level of knowledge and IQ that Tank has attained and grasped in his career due to his experience in the ring. Though we still want to see him fight more, Frank is severely below that from my vantage point. When I see the opponents he's fought and how often, or rather how few times, I've seen him in the ring for my liking for this level of opponent. Though again, he is still a real contender. He can be a world champion one day, and I think he will be. It's just a matter of, against Tank, don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's got enough experience. I really don't. And he makes far too many mistakes that Tank will be able to capitalize on. Frank Martin's ability to be defensive is real. I repeat, Frank Martin's ability to be defensive is absolutely real. Problem is, in that defensive skill set, there are glaring holes in his game. Like with the fact that he moves his feet, doesn't move his head. If he doesn't move his head, it's always in the same way. Ducking down, either in a full guard or a half guard. Or full guard or Philly shell, ducking down and in. It's always the same way. Moving his head is very rudimentary. His feet, similar to Shakur, is what really saves the day in terms of his defensive ability. Understand him. His feet and his blocking, that's what works. Head movement, not that much. And it can be tracked. It can be, you can catch him. You really can, where he's going to go. You can, after 3 rounds, you can tell where he's going to go defensively in terms of where he moves his head. Where he moves his feet, a little bit harder to track. But once you get that down, once you're able to get him in the corner, you can see and you can gauge where he's going to duck in or out of. Kind of repetitive, which can be a detriment in the world of boxing. Since that's the case, going up against Tank, surefire way to get knocked out. Surefire way to get blown out the water. Surefire way. And on top of the fact that even with him being defensive and when he does get in the corner, he will get caught through his guard. There's been times and lapses in his defense when he got overly anxious or thinks he's safe when he really isn't. Relaxes and gets to a point where the exchange is over. And then boom, if you are willing to throw an extra shot, you can tag him. Especially with straight punches. They can catch Frank Martin. They can hurt Frank Martin. And the biggest thing outside of everything else that we've talked about as to why Frank's going to lose and the holes in this game, it is the body attack that we've seen Frank Martin susceptible to. Again, against Hartunian, we saw him against the body get damaged, get hurt, get caught on a consistent basis. You can train Frank to be able to get caught where you want to catch him. You can train him to it. We saw it against Hartunian. He would consistently guard high with that Philly shell and open up that left side, or right side, excuse me. Hartunian would gladly oblige, consistently landing right around the elbow, right on the body. Or right under the elbow, right in the center of the body. We see it constantly. That is what Frank is susceptible to. And Hartunian isn't even that fast of a fighter. Rangy, understandable, but still, it wasn't the speed that caught him. It was the timing and training Frank to want to block high. And just the natural tendency of him to block high. Then go to the body, damage him to the body. You saw the physical reactions. There is a weakness there. You can train Frank to be susceptible to tendencies. And then once you mix it up, now you're in real trouble if you're Frank Martin. Especially going up against somebody like a Tank Davis, because you're going up against one of the best offensive fighters in the world, like we talked about before. And there's so many things that are wrong with Frank in terms of his defensive skill set, even though he can be and is a defensive fighter. He is very fast. He is very twitchy. He is somebody who can give you some trouble. Absolutely. He can counter you. Everything I said beforehand is true. Going up against Frank Tank, though, Gervonta Davis doesn't play those types of games. He will open up when he sees that you're vulnerable. And there are a lot of times when Frank thinks that he's safe. He's not safe. He's not. Hartunian threw a lot of wrenches at him, and we saw that there were some screws that are loose in the game plan of Frank Martin. And the fighting tactics of Frank Martin. Now that those are exposed, I guarantee Tank is going to exploit them. And we will see Tank most likely in round 8 knock out Frank Martin. I can see it. I can wholeheartedly see it. And it comes from the training of Frank Martin to be poised and primed to defend one thing. And it's going to be repetition over and over and over up until when Tank switches it up. It's going to be he gets caught and he gets dropped. And then either it's going to be a one-hitter quitter or it's going to be a situation where it's the beginning of the end. And he's going to be going through that guard. He's going to duck down. And he's going to either get caught with an uppercut like we've seen Tank do multiple times in his career, or it's going to be a straight left. Straight left right down the pipe through the guard on the temple. It could even be a body shot at an uppercut like, or a straight left like we saw against Ryan Grcia. Because again, it is susceptible. We're going to see him get knocked out. I wholeheartedly believe we're going to see Frank get knocked out by a Tank in 8 rounds. Because it's going to be the Tank's going to download his opponent like we've always done, go in, and as the fight progresses, open up his offense more and more. Once it gets adjusted to the speed and explosiveness of Frank Martin, it's going to then start laying down the traps. Lay down the treats for you to get trained to follow me. Do this, do this, do this. Then when I switch it up, now you don't know what to do. So I'm gonna give you the same look, but you don't know which option's coming. And once I get you there, if you're Tank, you're done. There's nothing you can do to me now. And it's over. That's what I can see happening with Frank Martin. So I got Tank knocking out Frank Martin in 8 rounds. Hopefully I'm right, hopefully I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. Regardless of what happens, we will be here to cover it all. And this is going to be a step in the right direction for him fighting other champions like potentially Vasily Lomachenko, getting in a fight with Shakur Stevenson, going and claiming all the belts at 135, and potentially moving up to 140. This is a fight in the right direction for Tank. This is what we want to see, and we want to see more of it from people like Tank Davis. This is a phenomenal fight. It's going to be an entertaining fight. It's going to be an entertaining affair. Don't get it twisted. And I guarantee you, I think we're going to see Tank knock him out in 8 rounds off of either a counter shot and or straight through the guard, off of him ducking down because he gets trained to duck one way. And his defense has holes that even he may not recognize. And against Tank, they will be exploited. Trust and believe.